They sent me to the storage closet, not knowing I owned the room. It was one of those moments you never forget, the kind that clings to you sharp and surreal. As I stepped into the polished glass lobby of Wexler Industries, I felt like a stranger walking into my own story. Everyone was already buzzing about the mid-year strategy session held in the grand conference room overlooking the San Francisco Bay. I hadn't set foot in this building in 7 years, and yet the place felt smaller now. Maybe because I wasn't who they thought I was anymore. My cousin Jake barely looked up from his stack of name tags. "Oh, hey, Lauren," he mumbled, waving vaguely toward the hallway. "Overflows down by janitorial. You can set up in the storage closet." No hesitation, no recognition of what I'd become. Just the same old dismissiveness, like I was the family failure who left corporate life for some dreamer's fantasy. Aunt Diane chimed in with a tight smile, her coral blazer practically screaming executive ambition. "Let's keep the boardroom for the key decision makers," she added. That stung not because I wasn't one, but because they had no clue I was the one. The storage room, that was their idea of my worth. A forgotten niece with nothing to offer. They had no idea that I now controlled more of Wexler Industries than any of them combined, and the real meeting hadn't even started yet. They thought I was just visiting. I owned the company. If you'd told me 7 years ago that I'd return to Wexler Industries through the back door, I might have laughed or cried. Back then, I was the rising star, the golden girl, groomed to carry on the family legacy. But something cracked open when I uncovered the truth, the falsified environmental reports, the factory injuries swept under the rug, the cost-cutting that came at the expense of human lives. When I tried to raise the alarm, Uncle Gerald shrugged and said, "It's just business, Lauren. You're too soft for this world." So I walked away. They thought I was quitting. What I was really doing was beginning. With the trust my mother left me money she'd earned before ever marrying into the Wexler family, I started building. Quietly, carefully, strategically. I called my venture Marin Capital, named after my mother, Marion Lockwood, the only truly ethical force that ever set foot in Wexler's boardroom. She once told me, "You don't have to be born into power to claim it. Just build something strong enough they can't ignore." I listened. Over the course of 4 years, I created a labyrinth of holding companies and private investment groups. And piece by piece, Marin Capital acquired shares. It started small, barely noticeable, but it grew. A percentage here, a stake there, slowly like a tide rising beneath their feet. No press, no noise, just business. By that morning, the day of the mid-year strategy session, we held 51% of Wexler Industries. I held 51%, and no one had a clue. Jake, Aunt Diane, Uncle Gerald, they still saw me as the girl who ran off to co-working spaces and startups with compost bins in the lobby. They didn't know those startups were actually Marin Capital's incubation labs. They didn't know that my main office stood 5 blocks away in a glass tower that cast a literal shadow over Wexler's headquarters. That morning, I got the final confirmation Marin had secured another 6% overnight. The board was now mine. I had proxy votes lined up, legal control secured. The very same aunt who'd waved me toward the storage closet was about to pitch a proposal to a man who'd already finalized a deal with me. It was poetic, not in the vengeful, dramatic sense, but in the way life sometimes circles back to hand you the pen and say, "Your turn." I remember sitting in that dim little storage room, wedged between dusty boxes, and an old filing cabinet, my laptop humming on my lap. Through the thin drywall, I could hear them. Diane laying it on thick with Mr. Sky, using buzzwords like confetti. Jake tossing out fake charm like business cards. They were all so sure of their place at the top. They didn't know that Skytech, the company they were so desperate to land, had already inked an exclusivity deal with me. Not Marin Capital, me, Lauren Lockwood. And still, I waited. I let them talk. I let the pitch roll, because sometimes silence is the sharpest blade. I was no longer the outsider. I was the owner. When my assistant texted all proxy votes confirmed. Team aligned, awaiting your signal. I just stared at the flickering light above me and smiled. The irony of it all banished to the storage closet of a company I controlled. That's what happens when you're underestimated, when you're the quiet one, the one who walks away. They think you're gone, but you're really just getting ready. And the best part, the moment when you open the door, not out of anger, not out of ego, but because it's time. Time for them to realize that while they were busy guarding the throne, you were quietly building the kingdom. The moment I opened the door and changed everything. The sound of Aunt Diane's voice floated through the wall like a performance. She was selling hard, leaning on her smile and her pedigree, as if that could hide the fact that Wexler Industries was circling the drain. I listened calmly, legs crossed among old binders and boxes of forgotten marketing swag waiting, letting the moment swell. She was pitching Skytech like our survival depended on it, and in truth it did. They just didn't realize the deal was already sealed and not with them. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Mr. Sky's voice, smooth and precise, cut across the boardroom. Actually, I'm not here for that proposal. I nearly laughed out loud at the silence that followed. I'm here to meet with the CEO of Marin Capital, he continued. There it was. Through the wall, I could almost hear Diane's smile crack apart. Uncle Gerald's confusion setting in. Jake probably clenching his jaw, trying to mask panic. The realization was dawning, but too slowly. They still thought Marin Capital was some distant entity, a faceless investor. They had no idea it was me. I stood brushing the dust from my navy suit, adjusted my cuffs, and reached for the doorknob, the same door they'd shut in my face an hour earlier. I opened it slowly and stepped into the corridor heels, quiet against the carpet. Then I entered the room. Every head turned. You'd think someone had walked in from the past. But no one had ever really seen me before. Not like this. Not like I deserved to be seen. Uncle Gerald blinked. Lauren, he croaked, as if unsure it was really me. I walked to the head of the table with calm, deliberate steps. Perhaps I said we should restart this meeting. Silence. No one moved. Not Diane, whose clipboard now hung limp in her hands. Not Jake, whose golden pen had fallen to the floor. Not even Mr. Sky, who offered me only the faintest nod confirmation that we were in sync. I believe it's rather rude I continued to leave your majority shareholder in the storage closet. The silence cracked wide open then. I placed my briefcase gently on the table, clicked it open, and connected my laptop to the projector. The room lit up with the Marine Capital Dashboard Performance Metrics Legal Holding Stock Control. We now own 51% of Wexler Industries, I said. Diane gasped. Jake sank into his chair, pale as the napkin in front of him. Gerald just stared, unable to speak. And I added, we also control majority stakes in 3 of your 5 primary vendors. We've secured your largest line of credit. And as of this morning, we've signed exclusivity agreements with over 80% of your top clients. You can't do this, Diane stammered. I already have, I replied, voice steady. And I've done it without cutting corners, breaking laws, or silencing anyone who dared speak up. Gerald finally found his voice. What? What do you want, Control? I said simply. Full operational authority. The Wexler name stays. The family keeps 20% ownership, but from this point on, all decisions go through Marin's board. The old guard my family sat frozen. They hadn't just lost control. They'd been outplayed at their own game. But I wasn't there for revenge. I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to rebuild the legacy they had poisoned. This isn't destruction, I said, passing around copies of Marin's proposal. This is restoration. I'm not here to tear Wexler down. I'm here to make it better, stronger, ethical, accountable. I paused, letting the weight of it settle in. It wasn't just the boardroom that had changed that day. It was the balance of power. And for the first time in Wexler Industries' long, troubled history, the person holding it was someone who understood what it meant to lead with integrity. I didn't come to burn it down, I came to save it. For a long moment, no one said a word. Not a cough, not a shuffled paper, just silence. Thick, stunned silence. The kind that follows an earthquake. I looked around the boardroom faces I'd grown up seeing every Thanksgiving, every 4th of July barbecue. People who once patted me on the head and told me I was too emotional for business. They were staring at me now like they'd never seen me before, because they hadn't. I was no longer Lauren the freelancer or the niece who'd walked away in disappointment. I was the woman who had quietly built the lifeline they didn't even know they needed. I clicked the next slide. Charts and numbers filled the screen, declining revenue, rising legal risk customer attrition, the slow, steady unraveling of Wexler Industries. I turned to face them. Since I left, your stock has dropped over 60%, I said calmly. You're under review by the EPA for emissions violations. The Department of Labor is preparing subpoenas related to offshore labor practices. These aren't rumors. They're facts. Gerald looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. Diane kept blinking as if she could blink her way back to control. Jake, ever the golden boy, tried to smile. But we can turn it around, right, he said. With your investment, I nodded. That's the purpose of today's proposal. Marin Capital is prepared to inject $200 million into Wexler, but it comes with conditions. The days of shortcuts and cover-ups are over. I passed around folders. Inside a full plan for reform, new leadership structure, mandatory compliance training, sustainable manufacturing policies, worker safety initiatives. Uncle Gerald finally spoke, his voice quiet but clipped. What do you want in return? Full operational control, I answered. From this day forward, Wexler is no longer run on tradition, but on principle. You'll retain 20% ownership, but Marin governs operations, policy, hiring, and finance. Diane scoffed. You're destroying our family's legacy. No, I said firmly. I'm preserving it by pulling it back from the brink. This isn't just about saving the company. It's about cleaning it up. The next slide hit harder than the last. A decade of OSHA violations, fines, lawsuits, documents they thought buried, now up on a screen. This isn't just a business problem, I said. It's a moral one. I walked away 7 years ago because no one would listen when I brought this forward. You told me I was naive, too sensitive. You told me it was just how business worked. I paused and looked directly at Uncle Gerald. Well, I said, voice unwavering, this is how I do business. Mr. Sky, seated quietly at the end of the table, finally spoke. That's why our firm partnered with Marin. We believe in ethical capitalism and in people who lead with accountability. Diane's tone cracked. Ethics don't pay salaries. I clicked again. They do, I countered. Marin's profit margins are 30% higher than industry average. Why? Because when you invest in people, when you comply with laws, when you build trust, the returns follow. A heavy quiet settled over the room again. Then Gerald sighed a long, weathered sound and leaned back in his chair. His business instincts were catching up with the truth. You've already lined this up, he said slowly. The buyout, the restructuring, the client shift. This wasn't spontaneous. No, I replied. It was intentional. strategic, necessary. The question now wasn't whether the Wexler family could accept what I'd done. It was whether they were ready to accept that I had done it better, and if they wanted to be part of the company's future or just a footnote in its past. This time, they had to earn it. A heavy hush hung in the air after I laid out the terms. This wasn't just a boardroom anymore, it was a crossroads. The family legacy wasn't being handed over or torn down. It was being rewritten, and I was giving them the pen if they were willing to use it the right way. Uncle Gerald was still holding the contract with both hands, reading it word for word. A man who'd once skimmed every deal like it was beneath him was now clinging to every clause like it was a life raft. Diane looked ready to explode. Her voice, usually cool and composed, cracked with disbelief. You'd really push your own family out. After everything, I'm not pushing anyone out, I replied calmly. But I won't protect anyone either. You want a seat at the table, then earn it just like everyone else on the Marin team has. Jake gave a weak laugh like this was all some elaborate joke. Come on, Lauren. You can't be serious. You've known us your whole life. I looked at him not unkindly. Yes, I have, I said. And that's exactly why I know what you're capable of, both the good and the bad. But this time, family isn't your resume. It's your starting point. Diane folded her arms. We can find another investor. Can you? I raised an eyebrow. Check your phones. At once, everyone's screens lit up. A push alert from Bloomberg Marin Capital declares majority ownership of Wexler Industries. Immediate restructuring expected by close of market. Jake's phone slipped slightly in his hand. Diane's eyes darted across the room. Gerald, for once, didn't say a word. It was over. Whatever leverage they thought they had was gone. I'm offering you a place in this next chapter, I said, voice steady. Not because I owe it to you, but because I believe in second chances for this company and for the people in this room. But make no mistake, this is a new era. Titles won't be inherited. Positions won't be handed down. I paused, making sure each word landed. If you stay, you'll go through Marin's training. You'll learn ethical leadership, compliance, environmental responsibility. And yes, it'll be hard, but it'll be real. If not, well, you walk away with your 20% stake and you figure out what comes next. Silence again. Not the stunned kind from earlier. This was different. This was contemplation, the quiet before a choice. Uncle Gerald finally looked up. His voice was low but clear. You'll keep the Wexler name. I nodded. The name, yes, but not the practices that poisoned it. He looked down again, then slowly reached for the pen. His signature was heavy with reluctance, but also something new. Maybe it was acceptance, or maybe just the weight of truth. Diane, ever the fighter, clung to his arm. You can't let her do this, she pleaded. We built this. This is ours. I looked her straight in the eye, and now it's ours to fix. Jake slumped into his seat, defeated. He didn't speak again. Gerald signed, and just like that, the power shifted. Not with a gavel, not with a vote, but with a signature that said the future belonged to a different kind of leader. I didn't want to destroy my family's legacy. I wanted to elevate it. And if they were brave enough to rise with me, I was willing to show them the way. But this time, they had to earn it, just like I did. How we started over together. Change is a funny thing. At first, it feels like betrayal, especially in a family business, but sometimes the greatest loyalty you can show is not protecting the way things were, but helping people become something better. That's exactly what the year after the takeover became, a journey not just for Wexler Industries, but for the people who used to run it. I remember the first Monday under Marin Capital's full leadership. The boardroom, once tense with unspoken power plays, and ego, now opened with a round table where every voice mattered. We didn't just change policies, we changed culture, and I knew if this was going to work, it couldn't just be my transformation. The family had to change too. To her credit, Diane surprised everyone. I had expected resistance, a quiet exit, or some behind-the-scenes maneuvering. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was survival, but something in her clicked. She enrolled in ESG environmental, social, and governance certification courses on her own dime. She attended every compliance workshop, sat in on audits, and asked questions most board members never had the humility to ask. 6 months later, she wasn't just a figurehead. She was leading our corporate responsibility division passionately, and for the first time authentically. Then there was Jake. He didn't adapt as quickly. For a while, he sulked through meetings, eyes glazed over whenever we discussed ethics or sustainability. He was used to smooth talk and stockholder schmoozing, not community engagement or environmental audits. But I knew Jake had one thing going for him: charm. And once that charm found a real purpose, he finally started showing up. We placed him in charge of public outreach. A symbolic move at first, but he took to it like he'd been waiting for someone to believe in him for real. No more selling false promises to investors. Now, he was rebuilding trust with local partners, labor groups, even city councils. It wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, but he owned them. And in time, his reputation stopped being just family name privilege and started becoming something earned. And Uncle Gerald, he did the hardest thing a lifelong CEO could do. He stepped down, not because I forced him, but because he realized that the company he once built no longer fit the world it lived in. He stayed on as a senior advisor. His wisdom, once used to dismiss inconvenient truths, now helped guide difficult transitions. He started listening more, speaking less. And when he did speak, it was with reflection, not resistance. One moment still stays with me. It was almost a year to the day since I took over. I was standing in my office at Sterling Tower, floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glowing below, when Maya, my assistant, popped in. "Your uncle's here for the quarterly review." Jennifer just joined him. "She's got notes on the new worker safety initiatives." I looked up and smiled, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. These were the same people who once stuffed me in a storage closet, and now they were walking into my office together, ready to go over numbers that reflected not just profit, but progress. That's when I realized something. Leadership isn't about tearing the old down. It's about giving it a better reason to rise. And that's what we'd done, together. Wexler Industries was no longer just a family legacy. It was proof that people, even the stubborn ones, can grow when you give them a reason to. Legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you build. A year later, I stood at the window of my office in Sterling Tower, watching the city stretch out below me, glowing in the late afternoon sun. Just across the skyline stood the old Wexler Industries building. Only now its facade bore two logos, ours and Marin Capital's, side by side, and beneath them a new emblem, Certified Ethical Business Leader. We didn't just save the company, we redefined it. From the rooftop helipad to the warehouse floor, Wexler had become something more than a name passed down through generations. It was now a place where integrity shaped every decision, where employees were valued, and where profits and principles finally coexisted. My mother once told me, "Don't wait for someone to hand you the keys. Build the door yourself." That's exactly what I did. And to my surprise, the very people who shut me out, some of them stepped through that door with me. Not all, but enough. You don't have to inherit power to make change. Whether it's in a company, a family, or your own life, you can build something better from the ground up, quietly, purposefully. And when your moment comes, step into it without apology. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated, told to sit in the back while others led? Share your story in the comments. Let's grow stronger together. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire strength, integrity, and second chances. You're not just building success, you're building legacy, and it starts now.